You and I love to talk about music. That's what we do on this channel. But whenever we have the opportunity, we also love film. So we want to talk about the way that music is used in film because, man, some directors do it better than others. And then there are some that are head and shoulders, I think, above the rest. In preparing for our conversation, I've actually come up with a list that I'm running by you here, which is a list of the greatest needle drop directors. I have a list that starts at number 5 and takes us to number 1, and then a bunch of honorable mentions. But I want your thoughts because I know that it's funny doing this list. It's like listing my top 5. I was like, are these just my top 5 directors? And it's like, maybe not quite. There are a couple omissions here, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on my list. And we're just going to jump right into this thing with number 5 on the directors who use music in their movies in the best way possible. And of course, we're talking about needle drops, so not the original scores, but actually sourcing music to bring into the mix. Number 5 for me, I have to have Paul Thomas Anderson on this list because PTA takes a different approach from other directors that I have and that I'm going to mention here, because he's often choosing really recognizable songs instead of finding obscure tracks that people have heard, but he uses them in really clever ways. So Boogie Nights, which you and I have talked about on this channel, is full of examples of this. We did an episode on the greatest opening needle drops. Best of My Love by The Emotions was one that you mentioned, right? Like that's the opening to Boogie Nights. Such an interesting choice because that's a song that most people had heard in 1997, but it really sets the stage perfectly. And then you also in the same movie have the use of Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield in that awesome firecracker scene with Alfred Molina, right? A very conventional song used in a very menacing, sort of unconventional way. And then I don't know how far you went with PTA if you're still watching movies, but looking even further into Licorice Pizza in 2021, PTA uses like Life on Mars by David Bowie, which is again like another song we've all heard so many times, but it's just like the perfect fit for the scene. So the reason PTA isn't even higher on this list is because a lot of his films don't really rely on needle drops because it wouldn't make sense. You know, I'm not going to tune into There Will Be Blood and expect to hear like a Rolling Stones needle drop, right? Like, but for what he does in the movies where those needle drops are necessary and really make the movie, he's number 5. I doubt you have an argument with that inclusion. Am I right?
You are exactly right. Yeah. some of the some of my favorite movies of all time are Paul Thomas Anderson films, and yeah, the movie Boogie Nights is the perfect example of that. And like you said, using music in an unconventional, or using a song in an unconventional way, a song that's always been looked at in one way and then used in a film in a total different mood and setting is always so much fun.
Number 4 on our list, on my list here. I know you're going to be okay with this one. You might just actually be upset that he's not higher on the list, which is our dude Quentin Tarantino. So Tarantino comes in at number 4 for me. He's just a legend on using music in his films, especially in his earlier work. Tarantino's particular superpower in that run of early movies, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, is he's using songs that were largely obscure. His soundtracks were really fodder for tastemakers, and they often pulled from previous decades. He's also great at juxtaposition. And you think about, you mentioned this one in our greatest needle drops of all time in Reservoir Dogs. You think about the bubblegum pop song Stuck in the Middle by Steeler's Wheel being used as the backdrop for a torture scene. So, like Paul Thomas Anderson, Tarantino also had a large stretch of movies that didn't really call for needle drops all that much. So it's not like every film, especially in the back half of his career, is filled with like the greatest needle drops, but he still finds clever ways to use unexpected music, like his use of David Bowie's Cat People in Inglorious Bastards, where one of the characters is kind of getting ready for the night where she's going to bring the hammer down on a bunch of Nazis in her theater. And it's just like this really cool moment. Or in Django Unchained, where he uses a mashup of Tupac's verse from Untouchable over the instrumental of James Brown's The Payback. And that serves as sort of this victorious anthem in the film, you know, not expected in like a Western. But so even in those movies where he's not needle drop after needle drop, which is the reason he's number 3 on the list, is because it's not like every one of his films has that going on in it. But when he does it, man, it's hard to think of someone who does it much better than Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, you won't hear any argument from me. The songs that he uses too almost creates an iconic moment. And like Paul Thomas Anderson uses it in an unconventional way, but like you said, Tarantino, a lot of those needle drops are from songs of another generation or decade, but songs you weren't familiar with, songs that you didn't grow up knowing all your life. So then that brought a little mysterious too. I think of Jackie Brown, and he uses
Yeah.
some great music in there, and the character is kind of talking about the music and says, "Oh, have you heard of the what is it, the Delphonics or
Yeah.
something like that?" And I love how Tarantino kind of works the music in with the characters in a lot of his films, like in that torture scene. Michael Madsen's character is like, "Do you listen to this radio program?" It's a
You like
part of the.
super sounds of the 70s?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he writes it into the screenplay. So that's fun too. So I've always thought of Tarantino as just a great director, and like we've had discussions too where directors, this film is their baby and they obsess over it. And they're like, "What, I'm going to make the coolest movie. It's going to be um in a catalog forever that will be viewed for generations, and so I want to make sure my little baby is just perfect, and so I'm going to put all these favorite songs of mine or songs that I think would fit the film well." So yeah, Quentin Tarantino definitely has to be on the list. Good choice.
Getting to number three, I know that you're also a fan of Mr. Danny Boyle because we recently talked about the Trainspotting soundtrack in depth, and we discussed how Danny Boyle said that creating soundtracks in films is like one of the deepest pleasures of filmmaking, and you can totally feel that passion for music in his movies. Trainspotting is filled with some of his best work on this front, and I personally think the T2 Trainspotting, though an unfortunate name for a film, especially when there's already a really famous T2 out there, it incorporates a lot of that stuff that Trainspotting had as well. But even his movies that rely a lot on original music, which by the way, I think he's one of the best in selecting composers for his films. He uses unconventional choices, but they do great jobs. The man uses incredible needle drops. Like in the movie Steve Jobs, where Michael Fassbender plays Steve Jobs, and it's an Aaron Sorkin script, and it's mostly original music. That is actually like a super cool score for a film, but he also like finds these ways to include Bob Dylan songs and Steve Jobs. So for me, I think Boyle has maybe the best ear for like compelling music, and that's why he's number three on my list. Thoughts on Sir Danny Boyle? I actually don't think he's a sir, but Danny Boyle.
He deserves to be a sir.
Yes.
Another one of my favorite filmmakers that I totally agree with you on this choice. Um, I think about the great music of Slumdog Millionaire. I think that's a great film with great music in it. But as needle drops goes, I mean, Train Spotting has to be the high point of his choices, at least for us, because we've just loved that film for so long. So yes, Danny Boyle, one of the greats.
I don't know how you're going to feel about my number two. I think you're going to like it, but I don't know if you are as geeky about this one as I am or not. But number two had to make my dude Edgar Wright. Wright he's just so high on my list. Number two is high. You think of the people. I'm putting him above Boyle. I'm putting him above Quentin Tarantino. But he ranks so high on my list because he doesn't just use cool songs, but he does use cool songs. He's also literally integrating them into his films. So in a movie like Baby Driver, if you haven't seen it, you have to. There are these entire sequences that are edited, if not filmed, to fit the beats of the songs. it's syncopated along with the songs. You think of a song like Bell Bottoms by John Spencer Blues Explosion. That was like one of my picks for one of the greatest opening needle drops of all time. But also Tequila by the Button Down Brass, Hocus Pocus by the band Focus, which is always fun to say. There are whole sequences in that movie that are just like they align so perfectly, and you may not even catch it on first watch because you're so engrossed in the film. But it's really clever how he does that, not just in Baby Driver, but in a lot of his movies. With Edgar Wright, he's using music as characters in the movies, and his selection of interesting music, I think, stands up against anyone to ever do it. His three cornetto trilogy, which is Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World's End, has just countless examples of this. I think my favorite needle drops in that set of three films is the last one, The World's End, which is essentially the soundtrack of the main character's youth. And it includes songs from Blur, The Happy Mondays, Sisters of Mercy, Suede, Pulp, and Primal Scream. And then, of course, you have like Scott Pilgrim, which is almost Scott Pilgrim versus the World is almost like one long music video. And it has great original music that Scott's band Sex Bomb plays, written by Beck, actually. But their needle drops in there are amazing. It features music from people like Metric to Black Lips to T-Rex to the Rolling Stones. So for me, Edgar Wright, like the way that he weaves this music into his movies, and where it's like that scene like literally can't exist without another song because it was at least edited, if not filmed, to be incorporating the song, and the fact that he has a great taste in music on the level of some of these other guys. I had to put him at number two because of the you can just see the hard work that he has put into integrating music into his films. How do you feel about Edgar Wright? I don't know how much we've actually talked about Edgar Wright or Edgar Wright's movies together.
I know less about him than the previous three directors we talked about, but I do love the movies Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. And we talked about it's Shaun of the Dead where they're in a pub and there's a Queen song playing.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. When we talked about that, I couldn't really place that scene and I went back and watched it. I mean, that is hilarious and awesome. And so I'm gonna have to check some of these films out. Definitely Baby Driver. Ever since you told me about that movie, it's been on my list, and I just haven't made the time to watch that one. So I've got to check that one out. But yeah, this anybody who is cutting scenes and filming scenes to match up with songs that they want to put in the movie has to be very high on this list.
Right. Just effort alone, right? Like effort alone, you're going to be included. I love this guy. If you watch Baby Driver, you got to text me afterward. Any Edgar Wright movie, just if you haven't seen it, watch it, and we're going to geek out about it. Takes us to number one, and you know who this is. This is no surprise. It has to be Martin Scorsese. Scorsese's first on the list because he's really the godfather of this art form. This is an art form using needle drops in movies. From Stepping Out and Mean Streets back in 1973 to I'm Shipping Up to Boston by Dropkick Murphys and The Departed in 2006 to Santo and Johnny's Sleepwalk in 2019's The Irishman. I mean, dude, 73 to 2019. Scorsese's been creating the most memorable music-fueled cinematic moments in history for 5 decades. In many cases, it's more well-known songs like Gimme Shelter in The Departed or Layla and Goodfellas, but he's also just as likely to use more offbeat selections like Devo's cover of Satisfaction in Casino or Harry Nilsson's Jump into the Fire from the scene in Goodfellas where Ray Liotta's character thinks that the helicopters are after him, right? That paranoid scene that cuts back and forth between so many great songs and this sort of like stew of, I guess, cocaine-induced paranoia. The way that he's the best to ever do this. And every other director on my list owes a debt to Scorsese's needle drops. Not only did he kind of, in many ways, create this art form, he's also the guy who's done it for the longest. I mean, think about that. From the early 70s until today, the guy's making movies and picking really cool music to include in his films. So I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty ironclad number one, but I'm open to any disagreements if you got them.
How can you disagree with Marty Scorsese?
Right.
So,
Marty.
yeah, he did let me know that it was okay if I wanted to call him Marty. So, I feel okay with doing that. No, I mean, yeah, how can you argue? And I don't know that I knew that, um, or recognized that he was the one that kind of first did this or has been doing it so long, because I forget about films and have to go back and watch them to remember that. So I'm really glad that I think you dropped that knowledge on me a long time ago when we were talking about needle drops, an episode about needle drops. So yes, I mean, how can you disagree? That list you gave us, I think about one of the films that's fresh in my brain that maybe I've watched the most recent, that Dropkick Murphy song, how The Departed starts. It's just, just and it's just a narrator setting up the story, but you put that song behind it, it's just like, yeah, I'm ready for this, tell me that story. So yeah, Martin Scorsese directed some of my favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite directors of all time, and he's been doing it well for so long. How can you argue he has to be number one?
He's the man, absolutely. I do have several honorable mentions because there are a lot of people that do this well, and there are even people like in the Scorsese era and the pre-Scorsese era who I think who did it well too. But I wanted to shout out a few in particular. Uh, Got to mention David Lynch, Roy Orbison's In Dreams and Blue Velvet. I mean, both eerie, beautiful. Lynch often makes familiar songs feel sinister. He's really great at that. He doesn't always load his films with needle drops. A lot of times, he's relying on sound design to create tension. But when he does, boy, it hits. And it's very unusual and often scary the way that he uses like songs that shouldn't be scary. And all of a sudden they are. Well, he can really be evocative with that. So I also want to mention Cameron Crowe. I mean, as a former Rolling Stone writer, his films, Almost Famous, Say Anything, Jerry Maguire, they're loaded with these iconic needle drops. They're both personal, they feel cinematic. I wanted to call out Sofia Coppola. Soundtracks like Lost in Translation, Marie Antoinette, The Virgin Suicides, they like kind of like a Danny Boyle, they feel like curated mixtapes that perfectly capture mood and youth. Wes Anderson, I know you want to hear his name, and I'm definitely mentioning that. Known for that meticulous curation, a lot of British invasion tracks, hear a lot of Bowie, a lot of folk cuts, especially in Rushmore, Tenenbaums, Life Aquatic, Bottle Rocket, like some really great needle drops. I think, like a lot of the directors on these lists, like as his career goes on, there's less opportunity to put those in, but he still continues to have impressive ones in his later films, which I still like. I'm still all in on Wes Anderson. Even if some people think that he's gotten really singular in his style, I love it. Got to shout out Richard Linklater, Dazed and Confused, Everybody Wants Some, Boyhood. These often work as time capsules where songs are really kind of defining the era. So those were the ones that I really wanted to shout out. I'm sure we'll get done with this and I'll be like, why did I leave these people off? But that's what the comment sections are for. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you prefer podcasts, then we're out there in podcast land too, and you can follow us out there. So yeah, this has been fun, man.
Someday I'm gonna find time to watch a movie amongst the time of raising children.